I would like to thank MOS, Ragini Madam, and all the office bearers and chairperson to give me this opportunity to speak on Pulse for Precision in toric IELTS. Now, let's see first the importance of precision. As we all know that Chandrayaan-2 missed history by just 0.006%, just 200 meters before it got landed. Everybody must have witnessed this, that Chandrayaan just missed the trajectory by just 0.006%. And this was the picture we all are familiar with. And it was very emotional to see that. Now, modern cataract surgery has become more of a refractive surgery, thereby increasing our responsibility to fulfill high expectations of our patients. Myopia and hypermetropia can be corrected using appropriate spherical powers. However, approximately 20% of our patients undergoing the cataract surgery have got 1.25 or more the astigmatism, and it could be corrected by toric IELTS, LRIs, or lasers. LRIs have got its own problems like unreliable and unstable, and lasers post-op is a little bit complicated. Now, these are the effects of astigmatism on the image quality. Now, looking at a corneal astigmatism, on this we can see that about 87% of all the cataract patients have a significant astigmatism. So at least 50% of our cataract patients are potential candidates for the toric IELTS. The components of toric IELTS calculations, spherical IELTS calculations, and toricity. We are looking for a projected corneal cylinder for the cataract surgery. For that, we need two inputs. One is surgically induced astigmatism and the pre-op corneal cylinder. Now, current consideration of the toricity calculations. This was the old thinking. Like astigmatism analysis was based only on the anterior cornea alone. But also a disparity, if it would have occurred between pre-op and the post-op refraction, even after taking the anterior corneal astigmatism, it was attributed to the lenticular or the retinal astigmatism. But this is now new thinking. That is, posterior corneal astigmatism have to be outtest for the precision of toric IELTS, and posterior corneal astigmatism, if not considered, could lead to over or under correction of the toric IELTS. And another factor which we have to keep into mind is centroid SIA. Now, coming to the measurement of pre-op corneal astigmatism. Now, all the toric IELTS, we should all know that it comes into plus cylinders. So we just have to determine the steep meridian axis of a cornea. So that could be measured with the help of a manual keratometer, plastic disc, or automated or corneal topographer for immersion of a contact biometry. IL master and Lenstar, which I prefer usually is a Lenstar 900, which I prefer corneal topography, but I can't afford all these gadgets. Now, posterior corneal astigmatism, coming to it, like anterior surface is in the early life is with the rule astigmatism. As the age progresses, it shifts to against the rule, and the posterior corneal surface remains unaltered throughout the life, and it contributes around 0.7 diopter at the spherical plane at the spectacle plane. So around 85% of the patient has got a posterior corneal astigmatism. And what if we do not consider posterior astigmatism? This may lead to refractive surprises, and this may lead to overcorrection or undercorrection. So these are the various gadgets we can use for measuring the posterior cornea. Now, what is SIA? Now, it is the amount of astigmatic change that your surgery is expected to induce post-operatively. Ideally, surgeons should calculate their own surgical SIA. Mean and median way of SIA calculation is nowadays obsolete. Nowadays, we go for a centroid SIA, which is considered to be gold standard. Now, centroid SIA is a vector which has got magnitude and direction. SI is a vector, as I told, that it has got both components, magnitude and direction. The previously, when we used to see two patients like SI 0.5 diopter at 90 degree and 0.5, we used to consider that SI mean SI is around 0.5 diopter. But nowadays, if SI 0.5 diopter at 90 and 0.5 to 180, we have to combine it with a arithmetic mean, and we have to take it as a 0 and not 0.5. But for our benefit, we can say that in a nowadays surgery in 2.2 millimeter or 2.4 millimeter incision, the SI is hardly 0.2 millimeter. So, and if at all, if you want to go for it, we can go for a Warren Hill site or a www.drhill.com calculations. Now we have calculated the astigmatism of a cornea. Now, point comes of a marking in a reference marking. Now mark the eye while patient is in an upright position, and always make a patient very comfortable. And we can use any marker like gravity marker, bubble marker. Usually I prefer slit lamp marking with a BC AQ marker. And if the surgeon uses peribubble block, he should be doing marking beforehand, before giving a block. Now, having minimum 2 reference mark is a very good thing, so that the precision will be very good, and also make it a point to mark an incision site also. And if at all, if you're not well versed, if you're a beginner, you can go for a non-toric IOL and just practice on it, and then you can go for a toric IOL. Now this is my way of marking. I just use the slit lamp marking. This, as you can see, at a 180 degree, I just make a slit of a 180 degree with the help of a Joja's BC AQ marker, and then I make 90 degree, 180 degree, and then the incision site also. Just give me 2 minutes, sir. Now, slit lamp marking at intended axis, there is no elaborate markers to be used. We can directly mark the axis. These are the higher end machines. I don't use it. I am not Amit Mahajan to use Zeiss Callisto, which is going to speak just now. Now, after marking, when we have placed the IOL, you should do a gross alignment first in the bag, and always make it a point. You should implant the lens at least 20 to 30 degrees short of a desired position before OVD removal. And after that, we can stabilize the IOL to the desired axis during the during OVD removal and after the OVD removal. This is the shot I can show you. This is just I'm making it. Now, first we can go for a gross alignment, then you can go for OVD removal, then fine alignment, and after, if at all, if it overshoots, then again you have to go to the first position. Never go for anti-clockwise rotation, go for a clockwise rotation. Even if it is 10 degree, don't go back. Again, rotate in a clockwise direction. And if at all you're satisfied, then you can just tap the lens or nudge the IOL. And if at all rotation is not, if there is a rotation, it has got a significant impact on it. For a 3.3 millimeter of lens rotation, it would lose to a complete loss if it is more than 30 degree rotation. These are the intraoperative checklist. Finally, I would like to conclude by saying my 10 pearls in short. Ensure that patient is willing, promise less and deliver more, which is applicable for all the multifocals, LASIK and everything, all the surgeries, we do it. Precise corneal strip axis marking, incision location site is also important. Then CCC, cortical washup, accurate axis marking, in also orientation of the proper printout should be there. 2 compartment removal of viscoelastic, and to avoid parallax, go to a 12 o'clock position and then realign it. And seal the incision, never overinflate it. And just in short, I'd like to make a short last point, sir. If at all, if there is a misalignment, do a realignment within 2 weeks by visiting Bader-Hadel astigmatismfixcalculator.com. I had one case of 5 diopter, and it again landed in 4 diopter, and I had to go for a online calculator, and then again I had to repeat the procedure. Astounding difference between accuracy and precision is consistency. Thank you very much, sir.
Dr. Subodh, thanks a lot. It was a great talk with a lot of practical polls, and I'm sure that most of the delegates are going to be benefited by your talk. Thanks a lot. May I request Dr. Amit Mahajan to start their talk and share the screen for the talk on advanced technologies for workflow efficiency in toric IOL implantation. May I present to you Dr. Amit Mahajan, please?
Is my screen visible, sir?
Yeah, now it's visible.
Is it visible?
Yeah, you start.
So, good afternoon, sir. At the outset, I will like to thank respected Professor Ragini ma'am and MOS for giving me this opportunity. I don't have any financial disclosures. We all agree that astigmatism not only reduces the visual acuity, but it hampers the quality of vision. So it has to be treated. So let me share you a few interesting facts. Like as we all know that 30% of the eyes, they have more than one diopter of the astigmatism. Toric IOLs are much predictable than OCCI or LRI. But at the same time, even a slightest rotation like a 30-degree also can cause 10-degree rotation can cause up to 30-degree loss of final astigmatism goal. So in this interesting survey done in US, it has been found that almost 49% of the surgeons, they do not even attempt to correct the astigmatism at the time of the surgery. So why I was not so keen for the toric? So let's analyze the main issues. It all starts with the getting proper toric model, both spherical as well as the cylindrical component. And for that, you must have accurate keratometry, posterior corneal curvature, bang-on axial length, and modern IOL calculating formula. After selecting proper IOL model, you have to implant it on a proper desired target axis. And then comes the final role of rotational stability or post-operative rotation. So let us analyze these hurdles one by one. As we all know that IOL Master has been tested again and again, and it has been proved as a gold standard with a 3-zone telecentric keratometry, TK, swept source biometry, unique fixation check, and inbuilt Barrett suit. We are almost 100% sure about the toric model. So if you have IOL Master 700, then your biometry is almost always 100% bang on. Then comes the reference marking. While I am not sure about the ink marking done by me and my assistant, whether they are the same or the different, so I have to do it on myself. So it is little bit of time consuming. Again, to avoid the cyclotorsion, I have to make patient sit on the slit lamp in a sitting posture, mark it, and then transfer to the operating room. Again, there are multiple issues with the ink mark, like it can fade, spray, or by the time we finish the phaco, it may totally vanish. Now, while placing the IOL on desired axis, if the patient is not looking exactly perpendicular to the microscope light, rather slight rotation of his eye may cause parallax error. So these were the so many issues, and so I was hesitant in putting the toric lens. So what is the solution? Now, in order to overcome all these issues, Zeiss has introduced markerless suit for the toric IOL. It consists of IOL Master, Callisto Eye, which picks all the data from the IOL Master and project it to the Lumira microscope. So all these three instruments, they work in a direct coordinated fashion, and Callisto matches the reference image for the alignment of the patient eye and continuously track the image to provide display overlay over the right eyepiece of the microscope. It gives very crisp and clear visualization in high resolution and multicolor overlay in the right eyepiece of the microscope. And it is not bulky. It is only this much small external retrofit IDIS, or what you can call as a data injection system. And this is all what required for giving you the excellent overlay. So let's see how it actually works like. So first, it gives exact location for all the incisions. Like in this video, you can see the green marks are for the paracentesis and the red one are for the main incision. So we can select the incision size also, like 2.2 or 2.8 millimeter, and exact location also. In the second video, I am planning for OCCI, that is opposite clear corneal incision, which is very, very useful in managing low astigmatism of less than 0.75 diopter. So here we can manage the exact location, shape, and placement of the incision as per our need. By default, it shows a steep axis also, which is very helpful in taking the incision or planning the incision. It also gives marking for LRI. We can adjust distance from the limbus and position also. LRI, they are shown in the green light or light green light. Now, we all know the importance of the properly sized and well-centered rexis. So in the right video, it is with the overlay, while in the left video, I am trying to do the CCC without overlay. It gives two circles. As you can see, I have selected 5 millimeter and 5.5 millimeter circles. So it gives absolutely well-centered rexis. as we all know that we all are very skillful surgeons and we can fashion beautiful CCC in almost 80% cases, even without overlay. But with the overlay, it is almost always 100% well-centered, circular and well-fashioned rhexis. Now for the target axis, it gives 3 lines from limbus to limbus, full length. So there are least chances of the parallax. So let's see how, let's go to the video also. So now we have reference image selected on the IOL master. Callisto gives real-time overlay of the target axis, which is very sharp enough. Like in this case, it is 8 degree or 170 degree. So we have to just align the toric lens as per the marks. Remove the visco and finish the case. It is that simple. No role of parallax or nothing. So it is as easy as doing any other monofocal lens surgery. It is fast enough and with bang-on precision. To be very honest, before Callisto, I was doing 2 to 3 toric cases per month. But now with the Callisto, I am doing 2 to 3 cases per OT. So in this interesting study, it has been shown that Callisto saves almost up to 18 minutes per toric case as compared with the manual marking. So now it's time to say bye-bye to all these fancy gadgets and instruments. As an add-on benefit, Callisto provides HD recording of all the cases, and we can take the snapshot also for the documentation as well as for the medical legal purpose. So with the Callisto, 99% of my post-op patient, they have post-operative cylinder within plus or minus 0.5 diopter. And that's why it is more exact as compared to the manual marking. So there are some disadvantages, rather I will call as the limitations for the Callisto. Like there is possibility that registration can fail either at the beginning or during surgery also. And this is mainly because of conjunctival chemosis, ballooning or subconjunctival hemorrhage, and that hampers with the matching of the reference image. But fortunately, today we all are doing 99% topical cases, and with the topical cases, the chances of all these are very rare. Sometimes reference image registration is not possible in extremely uncooperative patient or in a difficult situation like a very deep-seated eyeball or narrow palpebral apertures. But today, the real frustration for any phaco surgeon is to see the unhappy patient because of the refractive surprises. And for me, precision and perfection is what that is all matters. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mahajan, sir. It's an excellent presentation. Really practical tips for those who are doing the toric IOLs. Oh, now moving next, we have with us Dr. Vishakha Jivkate. Are you there, Vishakha?
Yes, sir.
Oh, she will be speaking on iris to all. Are you ready with your?
Yes, sir. I'm sharing my screen.
Your start.
Yeah. So can you see my screen?
But it is not running here. We can see your screen, but
Okay.
can you start your presentation?
Yes, sir.
Share the screen, start playing, man.
Yeah, I have shared my screen, sir. Just 1 minute. No, sir, you can see my screen?
Yes, we can see, ma'am. We can please continue now.
Good afternoon, everyone. At the outset, I would like to thank MOS for giving me the opportunity to present on Iris Claw IOLs. I have no financial interest in this presentation. Whenever the large precedent occurs, the first thing comes in mind is get stuck. We have three options: ACIOL, in which there is a lot of corneal edema and so rarely done nowadays. The second option is SFIOL, which is generally expertised of a vitreoretinal specialist. And the last is the Iris Claw lens, which can be done by any general ophthalmologist. This is a chart of aphakia management, both non-surgical and surgical options, primarily focusing on Iris Claw lenses. This is the evolution and development of Iris Claw lenses. These are the various designs from, and now the 1980 decade saw the use of Iris Claw lenses being implanted anterior to the iris as a primary option in patient undergoing uneventful cataract surgery. The concept was popularized by Professor Jan Worst from Holland and Dr. Daljit Singh from India. The technical specification: it is a single piece biconvex Iris Claw lens made from polymethyl methacrylate. The total length is about 8 to 9 mm. The optical diameter ranges from 4.25 to 5.550. Total height is about 0.76 mm. And the design is iris bridge support. The iris bridge forms a shield and protects the cornea from touching the PMMA haptics of the IOL. Safe clearance from the vital structures, that is corneal endothelium and angle of anterior chamber. The most important advantage is unrestricted dilatation. The haptics attached to the mid-peripheral virtually immobile iris trauma, thus unrestricted pupil dilatation and constriction. So it is sphincter independent. Excellent centration. Once fixated, the lens will not decenter. The fluorescent angiographic studies by Strobel and Isaac have shown no leakage of the iris vessels at the enclavation sites. Pressure-free iris fixation. No iris atrophy when the recommended surgical technique is used. Only a few cases of iris atrophy in the area of fixation have been reported in the literature. The surgical technique I'll be explaining. Under the peribulbar or subtenance anesthesia, 5.5 mm scleral tunnel is made. 2 paracentesis at 3 o'clock and 9 o'clock position is done. The intracameral pilocarpine 0.5% is injected. Anterior chamber entry after injecting viscoelastic material is done. Anterior vitrectomy is done. Now, the surgical technique is firmly hold the Iris Claw IOL optic with an Iris Claw IOL holding forceps and position in the center. Gently enclave the mid-peripheral iris in the claw using Sinskey hook on the posterior surface of the iris at 3 o'clock and 9 o'clock meridian. I'll be showing the video of how it is done. I'll be playing the video now.
This is not running, madam.
Yeah, I'm trying to run it. Now you can see, this is the surgical technique of how the enclavation of the posterior surface of the haptic is done. So now, is it?
No, it is not visible yet.
Okay.
Okay, you continue.
Okay. I'll continue with the presentation. Yeah. So basically, we have to hold the Iris Claw lens in the forceps, and these are the haptics. And when these haptics are inserted behind the iris, we give a gentle tap with the Sinskey hook, and as a result, there occurs a dimpling, and this causes the enclavation of the IOL beneath the iris, and it gets fixed. Similarly, this has to be done with the other haptic. And later on, peripheral iridectomy at 11 o'clock or 1 o'clock position is done. We have to remove the viscoelastic material and suture if needed to seal the wound. In eyes with intraoperative large posterior capsular rupture or zonular dehiscence with a posterior lens or IL dislocation, there is a slight difference in the surgical technique in which the implantation of posterior iris fixated IL is preceded by standard 3-port pars plana vitrectomy for posterior dislocated cataractus lens or IOL. Peripheral iridotomy or iridotomy, although all aphakic IOLs are vaulted, it is highly recommended to perform an iridectomy or iridotomy. The pigment layer needs to be perforated completely. An iridectomy or iridotomy has to be made to avoid a posterior post-operative pupil block. It can also be used to manage an unwanted iris prolapse. These are the photos of the post-op. Here we can see the clear cornea, the well-centered IOL with a peripheral iridectomy present. So indications are large PCR or severe zonular dialysis, traumatic subluxated cataract, congenital or juvenile cataract with subluxation, intraoperative nucleus or IOL drop, secondary implantations. The advantage is no suturing needed, easy technique, less time required, no tilting or IOL decentration or dislocation, away from the angle structures, no significant corneal endothelial cell loss, no chronic inflammation, minimal CME. Contraindications, aniridia, severe iris atrophy, large iridectomy, sphincterotomy, acute inflammation, uncontrolled chronic glaucoma, recurrent or low corneal endothelial count. Here's a chart of comparison of iris claw angle supported and scleral sutured PCL. And here we can see the safety profile is excellent. The outcomes are also excellent. The clinical history is 30+ years. The toric option is yes, there are future IOLs coming. Suturing is almost not required. And these are the next generation iris fixated IOLs, which are foldable in designs, requiring small incisions and aspheric edge designs. These are the toric iris claw lenses which have been coming in the markets. So other indications besides this is iris fixated custom made IOLs include lenses for the treatment of unique ocular conditions like coloboma, diplopia, iris reconstruction IOLs made of colored and clear PMMA, pupil occluder for diplopia correction made of black PMMA. The disadvantage, which are very few, but in some cases it may occur, is glaucoma, lens pigmentation, iris scaffing, pupillary distortion, chronic inflammation, CME, distortion on the pupillary dilatation, endothelial decompensation. So to conclude, the learning curve is much easier to learn, easy technique, less manuring required, operating time is much less, no suturing or glue needed, cost effective. Objective evaluation of endothelial count, CME, and lens stability. The role of posterior iris fixated lens in aphakic patients in absence of capsular support is validated. In our experience, the insertion of posterior iris fixated IOL is well within the skills and maneuvers familiar to cataract surgeon. Very easy, simple, and affordable option with no serious side effects for the treatment of aphakia. PI is recommended in all the cases. So for now, if PC rent occurs, don't get panicked. If you get the surgical technique learned of iris claw, you will be happy, both surgeon as well as patient. Thank you.
Thank you, Vishakha. Nice presentation. Now,
Video was there, but it was not.
no, it's okay. It's technical, some issues are there, but it's okay. Now moving to our next speaker, Sachin, Dr. Sachin Daigon. Are you there, Sachin? No, I think. Okay. Bhagyashree, are you there, no? Hello.
Yes, sir, I'm right here.
Can you proceed with your presentation?
Yes, sir, no problem.
Okay. Okay, start sharing screen.
So, will I share my screen?
Yeah, go ahead.
I would really like to thank Team Moss for giving me this opportunity, especially Ragini madam. The previous speaker has not put his screen off yet.
Ah. Vishakha, you stop your screen sharing. Hello, Dr. Vishakha.
Have you gone? Ah, yes. Share the screen. Yes.
No, it's okay.
Yeah,
Okay, Bhagyas,
every-
it is visible.
yes, sir.
Now
I'll
it is
start.
visible. Okay, Asta.
Thank you. So, coming to my topic today is phakic IOL, getting the size right. And all of us would agree that phakic IOL is one of the most gratifying surgeries. And it's a wonderful technology for high myo. And from surgeon's perspective, there is absolutely no extra investment. Surgically, it's not a very demanding procedure. Once you know which hole on the lens goes where, you can do it, and it's reversible. So, what seems to be the challenge then? The most important challenge in phakic lenses is selecting the right size for a good outcome. And good outcome for a phakic lens essentially means a good vault. So the vault is the distance from the anterior surface of the phakic lens to the posterior surface of the phakic lens to the anterior surface of the crystalline lens. And the optimum vault should be around 250 to 750 microns. In other words, if compared with the thickness of cornea on the slit lamp, good vault should be around half to 1.5 thickness of the cornea. And with newer generation lenses with a central hole, the tolerance for the vault has widened further from 200,000 microns with a regular post-op follow. And if you select a larger size lens than required, it will lead to a higher vault. As you can see in the right side picture, the iris is almost touching the endothelium, even though there are two PIs in the place, and this can lead to progressive endothelial damage, pigment dispersion, angle closure. On the contrary, if you select a size smaller than optimum, it will give a low vault. As you can see in the lower left picture, the lens is almost sitting on the anterior capsule. This can lead to cataract. And furthermore, such lenses can rotate in the sulcus, which can give suboptimum outcome, especially in cases of big lenses. So to achieve a good vault, pre-op workup is very important, and the key parameters for sizing of the lens are the wide to wide and anterior chamber depth. Please note the anterior chamber depth should be internal from endothelium to the anterior capsule of the crystalline lens and not to be confused with external ACD, which includes the corneal thickness as well. The cutoff value for ACD for phakic lens implantation is 3 mm, but many experienced surgeons can dabble till 2.8 millimeter. And coming to the most important part, the wide to wide. Ideally, we should be measuring sulcus to sulcus because that's where the phakic lens goes. The only way to measure the sulcus to sulcus is wide angle UBM. And however, it's a very operator dependent and has very less predictability and repeatability. So we use two surrogate markers. The first one is wide to wide. It is an external and easy to use markers. Hence, it is most commonly used. The recent popular marker is angle to angle, which is measured on anterior segment OCT. And recent studies have shown that it has higher reproducibility than wide to wide, and it correlates better with sulcus to sulcus than wide to wide. So how to measure wide to wide? It is a very good idea to use multiple instruments and not to correlate, not to trust only one modality, but to correlate the machines. The optical biometer always overestimates by around 500 microns and should not be relied upon independently. Personally, what I do is I take the reading given by the Pentacam and put that in the digital caliper and fine tune the reading under the microscope. And it is very important to be consistent and stick to a fixed method and ask only one trained person to perform it for you. So having said this, I'll take you through a couple of cases of sizing surprises. First case is of this 23-year-old male. His refraction was minus 13.5 diopter sphere with minus 3 cylinder at 35 degree in right eye and minus 10 diopter sphere with minus 1.5 cylinder at 125 degree in the left eye. Anterior chamber depth was 3 millimeter. His wide to wide on the digital caliper was 11.4. in both the eyes. And as expected, the lens star showed a slight overestimation. So everything looked in sync here, and we advised the patient for toric IPCL. And when we input the data in the IPCL calculator, it provides us with a sheet of suggested implant. And the sheet advised us the implant of IPCL 12.5. But we chose 12.75 after discussion with the product application manager, because the anterior chamber depth was good and it was a toric lens. Great thing about this lens is that it has inbuilt custom toricity, so it does not need any intraoperative rotation. We just have to implant it 180 degree. And post-op day 1, the vault was almost 1000 microns, but the IOP was okay. So we waited for a week, repeated the vault, and it went down till 850. So don't believe in the vault sizing on the first post-op day. There are so many things going on in the anterior chamber, and now the vault is still a bit on higher side, but not in the dangerous zone. For the second eye, we reordered one size smaller lens. As we know, IPCL comes in 13 sizes in step of 0.25 mm from 11 to 14 mm, and usually one size lower lens decreases the vault by 100 to 150 micron. So we implanted 12.5 mm in the left eye, and we hit the sweet spot of 725. And the patient is doing great post-operatively. And this is the second case with -8 to -5 diopter sphere in right and left eye respectively. And these were her readings. And we were pretty sure that this patient will do good with IPCL. And we selected 12 millimeter model. To our surprise, the first post-op day, the vault was merely 100 microns. And we have learned to never take decision based on the first day vault. So on the second day, on the 7th day, the vault was 350 microns. What had happened here that we had used pilocarpine in this patient during surgery, and pilocarpine pushes the whole iris and lens down. So it takes a few days for its effect to wear off. And post-operatively, patient gained excellent unaided vision after surgery. So to conclude the time, with the time, phakic lenses are getting better in predictability. And if you stick to all the pre-op protocols, vault-related surprises are not uncommon, but can be dealt with. And last but not the least, post-operative result of one eye helps to predict the size of the fellow eye. This is my last slide. Thanks for the patient listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Bhagyashree. Very excellent presentation and very informative. I really appreciate your presentation.
Thank you, sir.
Now, let's move to our next speaker. Dr. Naveen is there?
Yes, sir. Can you hear me, sir?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you start your screen sharing?
Sure, sir.
Okay.
Is it visible, sir?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Thank you, sir. Hello, good afternoon, everyone. I am Dr. Naveen Soni from Amravati, and today I will like to present a common but an interesting topic of customized toric penetratoplasty through a case presentation. First of all, I will like to thank organizers for the opportunity given to me for this presentation, and I will also like to thank all the delegates and colleagues. I have no financial interest in any product shown or used in the presentation and video. So we'll go with the patient history first. So a 60-year-old male patient comes with a complaint of diminution of vision in left eye since 1 year. On examination, he had left eye mature cataract with clear PKP graft with no sutures. Visual acuity was finger counting close to face with accurate PR. He had a history of left eye penetrating plasty done 20 years back at Indore, for which other details were not available with him, and he was also not able to recollect all the details. There was no history of using any drops in post PKPI since many years now, and auto KR showed significant astigmatism of approximately 6.25 diopters. Topography was done and it showed a fairly regular astigmatism of 6.30 diopters, and the surface asymmetric index was 0.74, which was suggestive that it was a fairly regular astigmatism. This is how it looked on a Placido disc topography, and the central 3 mm and 5 mm zone were suggestive of a fairly regular astigmatism. So I planned for a left topical phacoemulsification with customized toric IL. Customized toric IL was selected as with regular toric IL. I thought that the chances of undercorrection are higher, and also there can be an incorrect replacement of IL. Toric IL was suggested to the patient, and we went through it. We did a pre-op B scan, which was normal. Specular microscopy was not done as it was not available in our CT. So why not take regular toric IL in this type of cases? As all regular toric ILs have fixed size and they cannot fit in all the eyes. They can be either oversized or undersized. Oversizing may result in error in spherical power as the effective lens positioning changes, and undersizing can result in error in a cylindrical power. So we advise customized. And why customized toric was advised? Because customized offers us a customized optic profile overall length for each patient. They have a plate haptic design with anti-rotational haptic pads, optimized effective lens positioning design based on axial length, capsular back size, and anterior chamber depth. No alignment required, as lens need to be placed horizontally at the axis of 0 to 180, and also no need to use steep axis for main incision. We can do a routine temporal phaco. Pre-op evaluation for a customized toric IL case required corneal topography, proper ray scan, preferably optical biometry, which will give a detailed analysis of anterior chamber depth and axial length. And we also need white to white measurement, and it should be done with digital caliper. All these topics have been covered recently in this 1 hour by various speakers beautifully, and I will like to go ahead with the video. On the day of surgery, before putting dilating drop, 0-180 marking was done with the help of 26 gauge needle on slit lamina OP. In OT, before starting routine phaco procedure, marking was done with the help of toric marker instruments. Two side fold incisions are then made with straight MVR blade. All the incisions in a case like this need to be posterior near inverse to avoid touching total contact. Air bubble is injected in anterior chamber, followed by trypan blue injection to stain the anterior capsule. Anterior chamber is then filled with high viscosity viscoelastic agent like sodium hyaluronate 1%. Continuous curvilinear capsulorhexis is then performed with use of cystindome made with 26 gauge needle. Though some surgeons prefer to use capsulorhexis forceps. Main incision is then made with the help of keratome on the temporal margin. Hydrodissection and hydrodelineation procedure is done to free the nucleus from cortical matter and epithelial sheath. Phacoemulsification is then started after filling anterior chamber with viscoelastic agent. Here I have used soft shell technique to protect endothelium. Soft shell technique is basically use of higher viscoelastic agent followed by use of low viscoelastic agent like HPMC 2% above it to protect endothelium. Stop and chop technique for phacoemulsification is used here.
After completion of cortical cleanup, IOL is loaded as shown here, with two positional holes to be kept at 11 and 5 o'clock position. IOL markings for this customized toric IOL need to be aligned on 0-180 degree. After proper
Just a minute.
alignment of toric IOL, as per routine, visco is thoroughly washed, followed by hydration of wounds to complete the procedure.
So on day 2, patient had a clear cornea, minimal congenital condition, vision was 6/18 unaided, and IOL was well positioned. On day 15, he had 6/12 vision and IOL was well positioned. Post-op fundus examination, disc and macula were normal. Topical steroids were tapered over 6 weeks, and post-op 1 drop per day was continued for lifetime. In conclusion, a pre-op evaluation and proper counseling is the most important step in any patient with very high astigmatism. All post-keratoplasty patients should be operated with due care for endothelium with use of soft shell technique and slow motion phaco. Customized toric IOL is best suited in this type of cases with good predictable outcome and comfort to both patient and surgeon. Thank you.
Thank you, Naveen. Thanks for your nice presentation. It's really helpful in our day-to-day practice. Now moving to our next speaker. Dr. Sachin is there? Hello? Dr. Sachin? Dr. Sachin Dayagamane? Okay. Excellent presentation from all the speakers. Now, any questions for the speakers? Chairman, sir?
Hello.
Any questions for the speaker?
Sir, my last presentation is there. I think pending. Dr. Anand Deshpande.
Okay. Okay, sir, Anand, sir. Are you ready with your presentation,
Yeah,
sir?
you can take.
Okay,
Yeah,
start
you
sharing.
can take. No. You can take the questions. Otherwise, I will.
No. It's time.
It's 9. No, yeah. Okay. I'm ready with presentation.
Okay, ready with yours.
Can you see my screen, sir?
Yes, Anand, sir.
Yeah.
So you can-
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for giving me this opportunity. I'm myself Dr. Anand Deshpande. I'm practicing at Kothur, Pune. So I am basically a phaco-refractive surgeon. This is again about the achieving best refractive outcome with the Optiflex Trio. I don't have any financial interest in this product. So basically, which IOLs we should use? As on the days we are with monofocals and multifocals. Sometimes back, 3-4 years back, accommodative lens came in the market, but not done very nicely. Now the third came is the trifocal lenses. So which there are some limitations in a multifocal IOL. So that's why the multifocal IOLs in between period doesn't get so many good outcomes with the patient, because there is some partial spectacle independence, decreased contrast sensitivity, and these lenses are pupil dependency lenses. And the basic problem of these multifocal IOLs was the increased glare and halos. So they doesn't become that much popular. Multifocal IOLs doesn't become that much popular. So why the trifocal IOLs? You will get 3 regions: distance, intermediate, and near, with very clear, with less glare and halos. So in what are the good patients where the success factors comes for the trifocal implantation is the patient selection and preoperative counseling. Main is the preoperative counseling. You should always tell to the patient with his expectations. More demanding patients, don't go with that patients. Accurate biometry, precise A constant, dry eye workup, aberrometry, and angle alpha. These are the main things we should see for the good patients. So firstly, you should see that which are the patients with our active lifestyle, highly motivated. These highly motivated patients are very good for the first some few cases. Spectacle independence, tell the realistic expectations of the lens and the surgeons. So all these are the patient selection criteria for the trifocal eye. Which are the not suitable patients for a trifocal are significant dry eyes, corneal conditions very bad, large photopic pupil, unstable capsular support, or optic nerve or damage or something is problematic there. Which are the patients are not good, are highly demanding, doesn't understand the limitations of the premium IOLs and not ready for neural adaptation. These are also not a good suitable patients for a trifocal IOL. Exclusion criteria during the surgery is vitreous loss, PC rupture, capsular excess tears, zonular damage, pupillary trauma. These are not good patients for a these are might be the intraoperative exclusions where you can you don't put or you don't go with a trifocal IOL. Preoperative counseling is the main factor for any trifocal, any multifocal, any toric IOLs. So this is very important thing, that you set a realistic expectations about the lenses. Explain the neuroadaptation to the patient. Provide handouts, explains about the lens, and just give a positive message to a patient so that the patient will not be high demanding. Preoperative evaluation mainly see for the age, see for the zonule size, pupil, retinal issues, optic nerve aberrations, see for the alpha angle, see for the kappa angle, do the topographies, and then decide, do the accurate biometry, corneal topography, personalized control, try to hit the emetropia in this patient. Aberrometry workup, trifocal should not be implanted in a higher order aberrations if the more than 0.7. In a coma patient, keratoconus patients, then if the higher order aberrations are more in the central pupillary area or central optical zone, then you just try to avoid the trifocal eye. So this is this is angle alpha. So if you a large alpha angle of more than 0.5 mm with a multifocal or toric IOL gives a compromised vision. So always measure the angle kappa, angle alpha, and decide whether these are the suitable candidates for multifocal and trifocal ions. So basically, trifocal ions are the best, where they give very less glare and hollows. So this is a comparison between the Bioflex Optiflex Trio and Zeiss AT Lycia Trio and Alcon IQ PanOptix Trio. So all the Biotex is a diffractive, refractive, spheric trifocal with a Bliss technology. Light yield is 88.3%. The light distribution in daylight is 40% far, 30% for intermediate, and 30% for a near. So it's basically a hydrophobic natural yellow and spherical aberrations of 0.2 microns. If the spherical aberrations are more, they give the depth of perception. So this is a design of Optiflex Trio. This is a diffractive steps, 12 diffractive step, and peripheral refractive zone they have given in of 2 millimeter. Where in a dim light, the peripheral or distance vision will not be hampered. So this is the specification. I will just run behind the time, so I will just go through the fast. This is the optical trioflex. Features are basically it's a natural yellow chromatophore, prevents the ARMD disturb. This material is having the higher Abbe number. It's a aspheric optic with a negative spherical aberrations. 360-degree square design, smooth lens surface which reduces the adhesion of the cells, inflammatory cells. This is a unique refractive diffractive aspheric design. Refractive zone supports the angle alpha and kappa and minimizes the hollows and glares. Optimize 4 mm diffractive zone, reduce the pupil dependent size. And this peripheral, you can see that peripheral refractive zone supports the distance vision in a low light conditions. This is the design actually 30 vision given in a 38 centimeter and a 72 centimeter. Optimize near and power of 3.5 plus 3.5 diopter addition at for 38 centimeter and plus 0.185 diopter working distance for a 72 centimeter. It's having a Bliss technology, which was a brilliant light sensing system technology, ensures effective utilization of unused light energy, optimum asymmetric and balanced light distribution at each focal point, specially optimized diffractive zones for intermediate and near vision without affecting the distance vision, and minimize pupil dependency. So Optiflex Trio blocks the harmful UV lights and filters the violet light. So high yield gives the best visual quality. Adequate importance to the near and intermediate vision also. This is my experience was excellent with the Optiflex Trio. The patient doesn't actually means I did almost 38 to 40 cases. So results are excellent. There is hardly dependence on the glasses. Some patients tells you about the glasses dependency, that is only 6% to 7% I have mentioned here. How often you wear glasses? Like that I have asked, because only 6% are unsatisfied, or you can say that sometimes we need glasses for this. So trifocal lenses overcomes the limitations of the bifocal IOLs. Optiflex Trio demonstrates a very good functional vision at a distance, intermediate and near in our clinical evaluations. So almost all patients enjoyed spectacle independence after 5 days implantation. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anand sir. Thank you. Excellent presentation. Now we have already exceeded our limit, so can we conclude this session?
Screenshot.
No. Okay, then.
Yeah.
Any questions from the chairperson? Okay, then we conclude this session, and Ragini madam, can you
Thank you so much, Abhijit Dada. Thank you, everybody, for the wonderful session and the wonderful talks and for taking part in this session. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, madam.
Thank you, Ragini madam.
Thank you, Abhijit Dada.